So the card that I'm going to talk about today is the Knight of Cups. And I want to start out by looking at the Knight of Swords and the Knight of Wands and just looking at the overall comparison as far as their energy is concerned. You can see that there is just a faster pace to the Knight of Wands and the Knight of Swords. And the Knight of Cups is more slowed down. It's more relaxed, more calm, more soothing. And this is someone that, if you get this card in a reading, this is someone that has good intentions. They're leading with their heart. If we look at the chalice that they're holding out, that means that they're holding out their emotions. They're holding out their heart. So they are giving that to you and being vulnerable. And they're also taking a risk in doing that. But they understand that risk and they are brave enough because they are knights, they are trained, they are protected, they do have a lot of potential, they do have a lot of power, and they shouldn't be taken lightly. They shouldn't be underestimated. They shouldn't be taken for granted because they are caring and they are very nurturing. Just someone that really does admire the beauty in not just people, but in nature and in the world in general. They love poetry. They're able to do things that are going to really touch people around them. So very charismatic and loving. So if we look at the Tabula Mundi, we see that this is air of water. So they're not just being emotional. They also have a strong intellect as well, because the air is intellect and mental energy. So they are balanced with that. So they have a way of using their intuition in a very smart and efficient way. And that says a lot and goes a long way in really selecting people to associate with and to really put that love into and that care into. So they are a combination of a lot of the water signs, or the three water signs. So Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer, but they also have an emphasis on Scorpio. So if we look here in the front, we can see that they have that on the front of the chariot here, there are scorpions. So different cards will emphasize a different sign, astrological sign, more so than the other. But that brings us to something really interesting, because the energy of Scorpio is also connected to the Death card, which is change and transformation. And if we look at the Death card and we look at the Knight of Cups, the cards just look similar. And the question is, well, why is that? And I think that if we think about what the purpose of the Knight of Cups actions are, we see that there's this idea of accepting and embracing transformation and walking and marching confidently into the realm of death. So I have to just interject here and edit the video for a moment, because I want to emphasize what I mean by death. I know that some people may be new to tarot, and I want to point out that death isn't just physical death. For the most part, it can be the death of a relationship, it can be the death of a job, the death of an idea, the death of a feeling, the death of a thought, so many other things that can be changed and transformed when I'm talking about death. So I thought it was extremely important that I emphasize that marching into death didn't mean physical death alone, okay? So just keep that in mind. And change, knowing that there's this beautiful process or this beautiful result that comes from it. On the Death card, there's the sun in the background, and there's this new, fresh perspective that comes after transformation. And the Knight of Cups seeks that and is after that and knows that it's worthwhile to put himself out there, because that alone, those actions alone, are one of the keys to really shaking the ego, because the ego is all about keeping you in that fear state. So taking that step and rushing towards or moving towards change is something that really does elevate you and really does put you in a new place. Now, the Death card, it means well as well, because you can see that it has a white flower on that flag. And that white flower, you'll see it on different cards. So on the actual Thoth card, he has a white flower there. You see that beautifully displayed on the Mariel tarot, that white flower coming out of this cup with blood in it. I think that this is just an amazing illustration of that purity of heart. So white flowers are known to be signs of pure intent. And we also see that on the 8-coin tattoo tarot a white flower here and the heart on his cheek. So really wearing your heart on your sleeve, but knowing that there's a purpose to it, and having that confidence to conquer death and to conquer transformation, to subdue the ego and really take control of that and to bring about that growth, right? And if you're new to my channel, you know that I connect my tarot cards to an element on the periodic table. It's an investigation or experiment that I'm doing, and I found a lot of beautiful connections, and it's been a wonderful journey to do that. But I go in order, and the order that I'm going in lines the Knight of Cups with lead. And lead is about transformation. Alchemist, one of the goal of alchemy is to turn lead into gold. And so it has that combination of really transmuting or changing man, or changing the energy of mankind. So just a little bit of history, before we kind of get into it. The Romans used lead in their pipes to hold water and to transport water from place to place. And lead has the symbol PB on it, which comes from the name plumbum, which means a malleable or a metal that's able to be shaped and formed, because it was easy to be formed into these pipes. And that's why we call plumbers, because they get that name from the Roman word. But going back to the alchemy part of it, just to get back on the transformation issue here, I want to talk about alchemy a little bit, because I think that the Knight of Cups is a true alchemist. So what I mean by that is we can start by looking at the Lover's card. So on the Lover's card, we have these two people coming together, and they're very different, and they represent differences, in other words. And it's called the chemical dance, or represents the chemical wedding. And so they come together for this chemical wedding, and in order to come together, they have to be broken apart. And that's one of the steps to alchemy. You have these steps. You have calcification, you have dissolution, conjunction, fermentation, and sublimation. And of course, there's sub-levels to this, and you may see some differences depending on what text you look at. But the chemical wedding represents dissolution. So it represents breaking these two individuals down, dissolving them, and then putting them together. And when they're together, a transformation takes place. So if we go to now the art card, which is temperance in the RWS system, and art is another word for alchemy, creativity. Alchemy is very creative. So you're creating something new. So they've created something new, they've come together, but now that transformation takes place, and they're together. You can see different components of each one on the alchemist here, and they're mixing fire and water. Now you can mix different elements, it doesn't really matter, but they're mixing the two extremes here in this cauldron. And on that cauldron, you see that there is like a hawk or an eagle on top of a skull. Now that's really significant, because if we look at the Thoth system, you see an eagle on the top of his head right there. And also, more importantly, we see that same thing on the death card here. We see an eagle right above his head. So that connects these two. And what that means is that what we have inside of that cauldron is not fire mixing these things together. It is the next component of, or the next step in the process of alchemy, which is fermentation taking place. So death represents fermentation. So death is inside of that cauldron. So on this card, you can see that there's watery background. He's inside of that cauldron mixing the elements. And you can see that there are these kind of gas-like or ghostly figures rising. That's our last step, which is sublimation. So they are rising to the top. And that's what's collected. That is that new thing that comes from this rising in energy, raising vibration. And that hawk is pulling them to the top as well, because it is connected with these strings to all of these ghostly figures here. So sublimation means going from a solid to a gas. It's a scientific term, and in order to do that, it takes a lot of energy. And so that's why death is a part of that process. And it's a very challenging thing to experience, but it really does really shake the system and really make that transformation take place. And so to go from a solid to a gas, you're going from something that's heavier and more dense, more earthy, more 3D, more weighed down by the world, to something that's lighter and more free and better off. And that is that goal of the Knight of Cups, is to get to that more free, light, and happier state. Because in order to really truly be happy, you must really subdue that ego. You really must become lighter and understand what true happiness comes from. And it's that growth and learning that you have to drop some of the expectations of the world, some of the expectations of people, some of the thoughts that you had about what should happen and what people should do, or what relationships and things should be about, and really focus on the idea of being a better person. And to focus on being a better person is the heart of alchemy, because a lot of people look at alchemy and they think, oh, these alchemists were doing something scientific and turning lead to gold. And that was a huge mistake. And that's kind of the blinders that alchemists actually put out front for people that were not ready to look at the spiritual transformation that they really were after. The magnus opus, the philosopher's stone, which is the goal of alchemy, which is the great work. And the great work wasn't to change metal, it was to change mankind. So I think that's just a wonderful thing to study, the Knight of Cups. Now, I want to leave you with one last card from Tarot of the Spirit, because I think that not just the image represents that shift and transformation and rising there, but the words in the book are powerful, and I think that they really do go well with what I'm saying here. So it says, giving art to the world symbolizes the emergence of the deep self into the social world. The Water Brother takes great risk in order to do this. Through engaging with the highly personal process of creating art, the Water Brother puts his own emotionality before the world, and as such is vulnerable. As a vulnerable warrior, his weapon is his cup, because his victory lies in being emotionally fulfilled. One cannot be fulfilled if nothing is allowed to enter. So he knows that he must enter this realm. He must perform this art and put himself out there, perform his art in the face of the world in order to make that change. So that is what I wanted to talk about with the Knight of Cups. And I know that the Knight of Cups also in a reading could just mean someone that's emotional, someone that has good intentions, someone that's caring, or a good guy. But there's a deeper meaning behind how alchemy ties to this. And I was glad to be able to study this alongside the energy of lead and transformation and connecting that with the Death card. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Will. This is Atypical Tarot, and I'll see you next time.